for putting on, you can't hear? Do you really want the microphone?
Yes.
Seriously? Okay. I was trying to avoid this because I always end up walking away from the microphone and you can't hear anything. Is that better at the back? Yeah. Okay. So I want to thank the organizers for bringing everybody together and also for all of you for coming tonight. I'm not going to be spending the entire time talking at you. In fact, I'm going to break from time to time because I have some questions that I also wanted to hear your answers to. It's not going to be a test on the report or anything, but it's nice to have a bit of an open discussion about the issues. I'll give you a little bit of background about the report for starters so you understand where it was coming from. You've already heard about the CIC. It was Jennifer Jeffs, the president, had asked me about a year ago if I wanted to be involved in their next research project. And the only decision that had been taken was that we wanted to do something about natural resources. And if possible at all, link natural resources into the broader question of Canada's foreign policy. There was no specific agenda in the beginning. I was just asked to look at the general area and try to come up with some policy recommendations. The audience for the report is government. And I say there's no specific agenda because I want to make clear that I didn't start out with a negative agenda. In fact, at the very beginning...
Oh, that's better.
Wait, is that better?
It doesn't matter if you want to walk around.
Oh, that's much better. Yeah.
How's that?
Much better.
Better, okay, good. I felt quite constrained standing behind the podium there. Okay. At the very beginning, do we have any Monty Python fans here? Okay. Okay, well then you'll get this. The working title for the report when I started out was "We're All Lumberjacks and That's Okay." But as we went on, it became rather difficult to work that into energy and mining. So in the end, we ended up going back to a more stable title, but it ended up reflecting the basis of the report. The early interviews were really broad for this, and in fact, I see some of the people in this room who took the time to talk to me so they can verify what I'm saying to you. I went out and asked people a very general question. I said, what more could Canada do to better manage its natural resources? And manage in the broadest sense of the word. So what is it that we're not doing that we should be doing, or what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? And are there any lessons for us from other resource producers around the world? And I did have the good fortune to visit Australia, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and the UK, although it's not a big resource producer, but there's lots of expertise there. I would have liked to have gone to Chile and Brazil, but we ran out of time and out of the budget. But I did talk to people who are familiar with how they do things there as well. And what I was doing was I was looking for lessons for Canada. And I will tell you, this isn't stealing anything from the report, but there's no one country out there that we can look at and say, they do it really well, let's just take that entire model and import it to Canada. But there are things that the various countries do that we could learn from, and they are part of the report. And there are actually also some models within Canada at the provincial level that could be used on a national basis. So I'm going to make two general comments about the 9 habits, and then I'll start in on a couple of them. There's not enough time to go through all 9, and I'm sure not everybody would want that to happen. So, but the first comment is that I found very quickly that you can't neatly divide resource policies into domestic policy or foreign policy. And just as an example, habit number 4, which is keep up with the world, put a price on carbon. I mean, you look at it, and it seems at first it's a domestic policy, it's a domestic decision. But as soon as you implement that, you find out that it also has global ramifications. And not just in the usual areas that we're thinking of, but also on trade and investment. And one of the things that cropped up quite a bit is the impact it has on Canada's brand. You know, so it makes a difference in some of our international relations, whether or not we have a price. I'm going to come back to this so we can have a discussion on the carbon price, because I know there are some dissenters in the room. Is this going off and on? This is a technically challenged presentation. Can you hear this in the back? Yeah? Okay. We're back to it. So, my second general comment just about all the recommendations is that they tend to be interlinked. So I use as an example number 8, where we said, where I said, stop the temporary labor addiction, find a long-term cure. But of course, if companies did that, and actually temporary foreign workers are really big in the news these days, if companies actually had to restrict their use of temporary foreign workers, then that would, in fact, they'd have to be more innovative about how they produce things with fewer workers. And that is linked in with recommendation number 3, which is research together or fail separately. Recommendation number 3 goes into how various countries are better at collaborating on their research than we are. But as part of the collaborative research process then, and that innovation, we probably end up with more products with value added or value extracted or value built on, which links into recommendation number 2. Anyhow, I won't go through the whole list, but as you can see, there are connections between the habits as well. And the reason I'm saying this is if you look at a specific recommendation, you might think that's not your area of interest or your area of work. But if you think it through, all of them have consequences well beyond the specific issue that they're addressing. So the first one that I want to deal with in more detail is recommendation number 1 about save your money, think sovereign wealth fund. What I'm talking about here is taking the revenues from non-renewable resources and sticking them into a savings fund, and then just using the income from that fund for government spending. And this does not involve companies paying an extra tax or any extra money. I'm strictly dealing here with how the government actually, what it's doing with those non-renewable resource revenues. Sorry, I'm going to keep stressing non-renewable because it's specific to this idea. Now, when we talk about this, the country that normally comes up is Norway, because they set the gold standard in this area. Since 1996, they've been putting 100% of their oil and gas revenues into a fund, and then they're just using the income from that fund for government spending. We're not particularly good about this in Canada, even though every province, except for Prince Edward Island, has significant revenues from non-renewable resources. I'm talking about oil and gas or mining revenues. And yet we have 2 what you could call resource-backed sovereign wealth funds here. We've got Alberta's Heritage Fund, set up in 1976, yeah. Thank you, by Peter Lougheed's government. And more recently, a lot more recently, we've got something called the Generations Fund in Quebec that was set up by the Charest government in 2006. It's a bit of a mixed bag because they put some hydro royalties in there to start, but they are planning, starting in 2015, to put in all of their mining resource royalties.